right, welcome to this edition of the Comics Multiverse. I'm your host, Chad, and if you've been in comics for any period of time, you've heard that comics are dying, and that they aren't. But my guest this evening is Louis Southard. I'll let him tell me how bad I screwed up his name when I bring him in, but he is currently part of a Zoop campaign called Comics Are Dying, the comic. And so let's bring him in. Let's find out about him and his project and wherever else the conversation takes us.
Hello,
How's
Chad.
it
Thank you
going?
so much. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And you were very close. You got it. I'm Louis Southard, and I am a comic book creator. I've been on Comic Watch before, back during the pandemic days, I think. So it's really great to be back. And if you don't know who I am the writer and creator of books like Midnight Western Theater, which was formerly at Scout. I did the Blackout Bombshell with Sumerian Comics. And right now, as you said, we're focusing on the really big project I have going on at Zoop that we are humbly calling Comics Are Dying, the comic, which is a basically brief history of the entire Western comic book industry told through 100 pages or 101 page comics by 100 different artists. So that's me.
Yeah. So um, since we're talking comics history, what is your history with comic books as a reader?
As a reader, well, I got into comics when I was 12, and I experienced a very close loss in my life. And I had heard about comics. I was pe- peakingly interested in them, but I never, knew where to get them. But I had heard through the news that Spider-Man, of all characters, was dying, and I'm like, well, how could that be? And I had death on my mind. I had grief, and I'm like, you know what? This seems like maybe the right thing at the right time. So I begged my parents to take me to the comic book store. They were even shocked that I could like point out a location. Just thanks to the handy Google, I was able to find the closest one. Fat Moose Comics and Games, still running today. Going to shout them out. Um, I got the copy. It was Spider-Man 698. It had the picture of Doctor Octopus dying on the cover, saying Peter Parker, stuff like that. And I read that, and that was basically my gateway into this mess. I fell in love with comics, and I basically never stopped reading them. And then, of course, I went the extra mile because then I started writing them, which is a
Hmm.
whole other beast.
Well, tell us a little bit about that whole other beast. In relation to your history.
So getting into comics, like any good story, it starts in Paris, France. I went to university on a global campus program application only, and I was accepted through that, but I didn't realize I was applying through such a thing. It was like a giant accident, but the school that I wanted to go to only would allow me to be accepted if I went to Europe. So it was quite possibly the worst time for me to even do that, but I was really not in a place to debate about it. So I went there. I was there for a month, and I absolutely hated it. And I could eat all probably the freshest bread I've ever had in my entire life. That was the one saving grace. But other than that, did not have a good time. So I basically had to ask myself a question of what I wanted to do in the for my future. Like, what do I want to do? And I was like, I want to make comic books. I love comic books. I want to try to make them. So I dropped out. I ran all the way back to America, and I basically dedicated myself full time to trying to break into the industry. And it took about a year, but I signed my first ever deal with a publisher, a fun one that real comic book people know and love, Action Lab Entertainment. And I showed up. I showed up a few months before that company vanished into the night. So
Hmm.
basically, I broke in while everything was breaking apart,
Hmm.
and then after that, then my first ever book was Villain Seeking Hero. After that, I took my first failure, which I think every up and coming comic book creator needs to really understand the whole comic so break your heart mentality. But I got that. I'm like gonna try again, and then I eventually signed on with Scout Comics and did my first official book that finally saw the light of day, and that was Midnight Western Theater back in 2021. So, but of course, if you are a Lewis lore lover, then you are keeping up to date with like all the interesting dramas and controversies going on. Not with me directly, but definitely with people I have worked with in the past. So
Hmm.
I am busy, and I've dealt with a lot of fun characters. But luckily today I could talk about a company I really love, and that's Zoop and everything I'm
Hmm.
doing there with this newest campaign.
So let's talk about that campaign. You've kind of talked about, mentioned the book already, or the project already, but kind of give us a little more, details.
Okay. Well, with Comics Are Dying, the incentive behind the whole project came around by the end of last year. There was a big hullabaloo online. Basically, another Comics Are Dying conversation boiled out, and I had had enough. I was sick of it. So I wanted to make a project that was not only a love letter to comics, but also supported a lot of creators working today, whether they be up and coming or like well established. So with this having over 100 artists, we have people where they've been working in the industry for decades, and we have people where this is actually their first credit. And I think that's fantastic. So as I mentioned earlier, it's a brief history. It goes over starts in 1842 with like the first ever printed kind of comic in the United States, and then bouncing all the way to the modern day. So we basically hit several like the most essential like significant events in history, whether they be creators or books or like um, time periods where like things really boiled over. For instance, 1950s. Got to mention like superhero comics are out. You got to mention the Comics Code Authority, stuff like that. So we really try to hit every beat, and we try to really hit every type of comic book there is. Every genre you can think of, from funny animal to underground comics, we got it.
So you're working with a whole plethora cornucopia of artists. There's 100 of them.
Yeah, no, that assembling 100 people, you, probably it was a nightmare. Endured a lot of burnout and a lot of sleepless nights trying to keep up with everyone. But the overall end product, I'm very proud of. And not only have I worked with mostly everyone I've ever worked with over the course of my career, to longtime favorites like David Hahn and Ben Matsuya and Alex Moore and all them, where I'm working with a lot of hot people right now. We got Netho Diaz, who's doing X-Men. We have Vasco Georgiev, who's doing Red Hood and the Outlaws. Um, and we have many other people. You have 100, it's hard to keep track. But no, I'm very proud of the team we assembled. And like I said, it's really nice to have uh, to be able to hold the door open for new creators, as well as to work with several amazing people who are working their butts off constantly every day for a lot of big books as well. So it's really an honor to work with all these people.
So what's the creative process like, working with, all these different artists?
Jazz. It's all improvisation as we were going along. Now, I started this with a lovely spreadsheet of all the 100 things I wanted to hit. I had a couple of people review that, tell me what I was missing, tell me what to add, swap out, and then when that was pretty much solidified, it was finding if anything, finding the artist first and then coming up with a one pager that would best complement them and the fun facts that they are supposed to represent. A great example I always give is Alex Moore, fantastic artist. They have an entirely unique style, and they're one of the hardest working artists that I know. I can't help but whenever I look at their art, see a little Ditko. So when I was going through this, one of the things I really wanted to highlight was Ditko's Mr. A as a representation of work he did after Spider-Man, as well as Underground Comics representation. So I had Alex basically do the Mr. A pastiche page. So it's kind of like that whole mentality for all the artists involved in the book. Some definitely I had an idea right from the get-go, and other times it was basically like an artist applied. I see their style, and I'm like, okay, I came up with the story now. Brain blast, there it is. So yeah, no, it was very much chaos. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it for most books, but given that this was a one-pager anthology type thing, I can get away with that kind of like rapid shot line of thinking. But yeah, don't try that at home, kids. It'll really be a wild ride in terms of creation.
So besides the artists, are you who are the rest of the creators? I know we're looking here at the cover to the to it.
I know you're alluding to that forward. A lot of people are really jazzed about who we got, and I am too. That's of course we got Mark Waid chipping in. I had a lot of different creators helping in a lot of different ways. Longtime Dark Horse editor Connor Knudsen came in to consult on a lot of the facts in the 100 thing spreadsheet. Ryan Stegman was nice to chip in some places. And of course, the forward by Mark Waid. Him and I had started a bit of a correspondence last year because I asked him for a pull quote on my last miniseries, and he liked the book and he gave me the pull quote and he was very nice. And me, as a longtime comic book reader nerd, I'm like, oh damn, I'm talking to Mark Waid. Time to ask him questions. I gotta bug him a bit. So I asked him a lot of like what he's doing with the World's Finest, and I was asking him a bunch of Shazam questions because Shazam's one of my favorite characters. So I was like, what about all these alternatives for Captain Marvel? Can he be Captain Thunder? Can he be Captain this? And he's like, no, like we thought about that. We tried that. So it's basically like, that was a little geek moment for me, but he's very nice to talk to. And then when I came up with the idea for this, I obviously knew this would be right up his alley. I know he's a prominent proponent for diversity and progressivism in comics. And that's very much what this book is about. It's a love letter to the people making comics today and how progressive comics have always been, as an outsider art, it's always represented different groups of people a hell of a lot earlier than a lot of people are saying. So I think this book is just an optimistic and I don't want to use the word wholesome, but I'll use it again, love letter just to comics and to people. And he could get behind that, and he was more than happy to fit the forward into his very, very busy schedule. Because if you've seen the Absolute Power lineup, the fact that he could do this while writing all of that was very impressive from my perspective.
And he's a walking encyclopedia of comics, besides that.
No, right? I wish I saw him on a different podcast, and I'm sorry that I watch other podcasts. I watch this one first before I watch any others. But but he's able to be like, oh yeah, that was in Action Comics 232 from 1963, and it's like, I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
No, the best I could do is list off some graphic novel titles probably. But I like to believe that with this book, I learned a heck of a lot more about the comics industry, but I was also impressed with how much I already knew. So it was very much a enlightening experience. I love learning and I love comic books, so for me, it was an enjoyable project in that regard.
kind of going back to Mark Wade, I saw him at on a panel with Ramona Fradon at Baltimore Comic Con one year, and it was just fun to see those two. And I know we recently lost Ramona, and so
I desperately tried to get her to do something.
mhm,
Not even just for this book, but like for some of my older stuff. I'm very with especially with my last book, Blackout Bombshell. I'm always keen on going outside the box with like some of the people who could do variants or covers or just contribute in any way. And I was like, oh, having like a golden age creator on like on a modern book, that's very cool in my mind. But unfortunately, she was only commissions only at that point. So, but you know, she was. No, I never knew her personally, but everything I hear about her, a tremendous talent and a great person in the industry. So, you know, she's obviously very missed.
yeah, I mean, not to get off too far off track, but she lived in upstate New York, and would I got to got to talk to her a couple times at the local con in Albany, and I was like, when you think back, it's like I got to talk to him, but I would have loved to have at least some original art. But
I always, whenever I think of older creators, I've never told this story on a podcast, so you've got your great scoop here. Louis Southard's greatest secrets revealed. But when I was 14, my parents for one of my for my birthday, like they bought it ahead of time, and then of course I went to the thing, but they got me tickets to go to a Stanley meet and greet, and I was like, whoa, I've always wanted to meet Stanley. So then it was at the Philly Wizard World before it became Fan Expo.
Mhm.
So I went in there, and I'm the only kid there. Everyone else, everyone else is very much an older person, and I'm just like nervously waiting. And then he shows up with his posse, and then they get the thing going, and we were all sat like in a U shape basically, and he was in the middle. He was giving his he was pontificating, he was gesticulating, he was doing all of his embellishments, and going on a roll. And then the Q&A um, started, and I was real nervous, but I'm like, I really want to ask him a question. So I raised my hand, and he picked on me, and he's like, oh yeah, you. And then I'm like, oh, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to be a comic book writer? And then he looks confused, and then he shuffles over to me, and he puts his hand on my shoulder. He's like, can you repeat that? And I'm like, what advice can you give to a comic book writer? And he's like, I have no idea what you're saying. And then somebody said like, advice. He's saying advice, and it's like, oh, advice. And then the only thing I could remember that he said was, if you want to be a comic book writer, you have to be damn good. That was the biggest piece of advice I could get from that guy. But that always stood out in my brain. That was, yeah, no, that's that very interesting experience, and I'm glad I have it, I think.
So with the campaign, what are you offering as levels of people for people to support the book?
Well, we're working on Zoop, which is a lot like Kickstarter, but it's wonderful because Kickstarter, there are a lot of people who are more brave than I. They handle, they make their books themselves and they ship them out. I'm very lazy. Zoop comes in, they make the books themselves and they ship them out themselves. And I get to do all the fun stuff. Basically, I do creative and I get to do stuff like this. So I'm very thankful for Jordan Plosky and Eric Moss for everything that they've been doing, and they really run a smooth ship. And you could see almost weekly there's a new campaign. So they're really doing great stuff. But for our campaign, we're running a really lean one. I feel like sometimes even in when regular comics and in crowdfunding comics, it can become very easy to overload the reader. So and I personally don't like variants or stuff like that. So I wanted to come up with a very concise campaign. So basically, We have a PDF of the book. We have the regular soft cover edition, one variant. We have a cover bundle where you can get both versions of the book. We have an overall bundled package where you can get basically everything that's there, and then we have a retailer incentive package. So that's pretty much all we got, and I'm very happy with that. The campaign has proven to be very successful already. We funded pretty much a little over a day, the entire thing. So as of right now, I'm saying we're on the road to 10K because we want to reach our first stretch goal, which is basically the first goal is to basically include a director's commentary that breaks down every little Easter egg and every like nook and cranny of the book. Because while I want this to be an interactive experience for people to go out and learn more, there are definitely a couple things that'll go over people's heads. So I feel like that would be a great addition. And then the second stretch goal, if we reach that, we will include 10 more pages with 10 more artists. And we will basically hit a couple of the beats that we missed in our timeline. Covering over 200 years worth of history is a lot. And I apologize to people if I missed your favorite thing, but this is definitely the way to get you possibly your favorite thing into the book. I know 2 out of the 10 pages that are locked down. One will be about Homestuck, which is like the first ever really big prominent webcomic. And then the other one will be about Captain Marvel and the Monster Society of Evil, which is like the first ever running story arc in traditional comic books. So we will have 2 pages inspired by those things. The other 8, not sure yet, but we'll definitely come up with them sooner rather than later. So while we are funded, anyone contributing, you are only helping make the book bigger and better for all the readers involved. So that's basically our big incentive right now.
Well, do you have time to play what I like to call 5 questions?
Yes, you can ask me 10 questions, Chad.
All right, question number one. You cover 100 different things in the history of comics. What are in your opinion, what are the top 5 most significant?
That's a tough one. I would say top 5. I'm not going to go in chronological order,
Sure.
but significant things. I think you have to include Dark Knight Returns because that pretty much changed the game in terms of tone and established a little over a decade's worth of material. So having one book that influences that much time and actual other books, that's pretty big. Um, other time period, other big things you have to do. Kirby and Stan doing Fantastic Four #1, ushering in the Marvel Age. That one's huge. You have to do Comics Code Authority in 1954 because that also just pretty much influenced and ruined partly good chunks of the comic book industry. I think even if you want to stick with superheroes, Superman #1, obviously kickstarted that entire type of genre. And then I'm gonna go with a cop out. I'm just gonna go with the cop out. I have to say, 1842, Belgium artist or cartoonist Rodolphe Topfer creates a book that I do not know the European name for, but it was translated in the United States known as the Adventures of Obadiah Oldbuck. And that's the first joke in our entire book, that this translation doomed us all because it kickstarted our entire industry and has led us to where we are today. So I think that's a decent top 5, and I know everyone's gonna hate me for that, but I think for the time right now, that's all I can do.
Now, I'm sure you probably learned a lot, doing this project. What was probably the most, you know, interesting thing that, you learned about that you didn't know before?
I think it would have to be the everything from the Platinum Age and everything regarding underground comics. Um, underground comics is quite possibly my like least interested genre. So learning more about that and understanding the history of that was very important to even make this book, because I didn't not want to leave all stones unturned for the different types of genres in this book. Learning about that was interesting. It's not the most fun. The most fun for me was the Platinum Age and learning about stuff like I know a hell of a lot more about William Randolph Hearst and King Features than I did previously, as well as everything with like Little Nemo and Slumberland by Winsor McKay, and a little bit more about Little Lulu. So I'm now well versed there.
Okay, question number two. Who would you put on your own personal Mount Rushmore of comic creators?
Oh, that's a really good one. I my personal oh, okay, here, no dead air. Can you answer that question? Who's your personal Mount Rushmore while I think?
Hmm?
Did you hear me? Hello?
Can you hear me? Yes,
No, I
I'm
asked.
here.
Yeah, what's your Mount Rushmore while I think? Because I don't know. Here, I'm just gonna go for it. I think you have to do Kirby. You have to do, for a modern one, I think Alan Moore, and then before that, I'll say Winsor McKay, and then gonna throw a curveball. One of my personal favorites, Alex Toth.
Okay, sounds good. Question number three. Desert Island reads, you can pick five things to take with you. I will include like omnibuses or complete runs of books, just to be nice.
Oh, thank you. You're too kind. I would always go with Grant Morrison's Multiversity. I always think that's a great and varied read. Um, After that, I would do probably I want another Grant one. I got to do Doom Patrol. I love that entire run. I'll do Neil Gaiman's Death. What is that? Is it the High Cost of Living? Yeah, no, that one's one of my favorites. Um, and then the other two, I guess maybe for my I know, Hickman's Fantastic Four. I love everything that he did with the Council of Reeds, and that does include Secret Wars if we're gonna do like a totality of runs, because that's the conclusion in my mind. And then the last one, what would I put as the last one? Probably, yeah. I really love J.M. DeMatteis's Son of the Goblin story arc, because I think Harry Osborn as the Green Goblin is one of the funniest and most interesting villains Peter's ever had. Because one of my most favorite ever issues is Peter Parker is like, I'm going to go to the store. Like, I'm just going to go buy groceries. Bye, Mary Jane. And then he's walking down the sidewalk and he hears something. And he turns around and the Green Goblin's just following him, maybe like 10 feet away in the glider, just following him slowly. And then he's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "What, is it a crime? Like, I'm just flying about. What's wrong, Peter?" And it's like, you're stalking me. You can't do this. It's like, I'm not doing anything. And if you attack me, you're in the wrong. So I just like that idea of basically your best friend just screwing with you, and just
Hmm.
it's like sibling mentality of I'm not touching you, and that being your arch nemesis is was very funny and very very surreal. I think that really hits like why I like things like the Venture Brothers, of using super heroic imagery to do really petty and very silly things that a lot of people do in real life.
Okay, question number four. And you probably have talked about it a little bit, but who influences you as a writer, or your approach to writing?
That's a good one. I have a lot of different inspirations depending on like what I'm after. One of the greatest pieces of advice I ever got was you read, in terms of writing in general, read Fitzgerald and read Hemingway. Like one is very flowery and the other one's very economical with his writing. And basically, your idea is to find your style in between. And the same logic was applied to genre fiction, with the advice being read The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, and then read the Dune series. Because not only did those guys not like each other in real life, but the way they confront world building and um, fantasy is vastly different, but both effective. So those were big inspirations there. In terms of comics, I love the works of Grant Morrison. I love the works of Jonathan Hickman and Neil Gaiman. And I like Alan Moore's happier stuff. I think a lot of his more dark stuff is obviously excellent, and they're all the epitomes of storytelling. But I'd much rather sit down with like 1963 or Tom Strong, stuff like that. I think that to me is like the more fun side that I like to apply to my own works, because I prefer to write happier stuff for the most part, I think.
Okay. And question number five. If, say Marvel or DC or, somebody that owns a licensed property came to you and said, you can pick any character you want to do to work on, who are you picking?
I would do for DC. I would really love to do any of the Charlton characters, the action heroes. So Blue Beetle, Peacemaker, Nightshade, Captain Atom, all of them. And then for Marvel, I really like the Fantastic Four. I would love to have a crack at them one day in the future. Fingers crossed. I have like a whole note. I really love the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, like all the stories kind of flow into each other, and there's always another situation going on. I feel like Ryan North is doing an excellent job with something similar with his current run. I have a whole notebook filled with ideas of like what I like to see them do. So I'm sitting on that for one day. Tom Brevoort or CB Cebulski's like, oh hey, what's up? So I'm ready and I'm cheap. So if anyone wants to hire me, I'm here.
So what are you currently reading that, you're enjoying? I mean, it can be something that, you're rereading or something current.
Well, before this started, I was reading Kyle Starks's Peacemaker Tries Hard. I just watched the Peacemaker show, so I watched that to go with it. And I thought that was really good. Um, I've been reading in terms of like newer stuff, of course, Hickman's Ultimate Spider-Man. I've been reading Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers, as well as the new GI Joe run going on with Joshua Williamson. Uh, I've been really loving everything Kelly Thompson's been doing with Birds of Prey. I think that's really fantastic. And anything older? Actually, my laptop sat right on top of it to prop it up. I've been reading the Spawn Compendium #1 with the first 50 issues of from Todd McFarlane's run, because I was learning a lot about the Neil Gaiman drama between the two of them. So I figured I'm gonna give Spawn a go then to see what all the hullabaloo was about. So yeah, so that's what I've been reading.
Okay, sounds good. So you want to give one more pitch for the campaign?
Okay, I could do that here. Okay, let me get jazzed up. Folks, this is the only book you'll ever need in your entire life. Because not only if you're a comic book fan or a comic book newcomer, this captures every possible genre you can think of. Not while we cover a lot of superhero comics, we capture every different kind, from Golden Age to 1960s Marvel bullpen to 90s Image Extreme. We got that covered, but then we do funny animal, we do underground comics, we do comic strips, European comics, even manga. We cover it. It's Comics Are Dying, the comic. It's got 100 fantastic artists working on it, whether they be old favorites or newcomers. I feel like like your newest like your new favorite artist is right there waiting to be discovered by you. It's a fantastic artistic showcase, and as I said earlier, we're already funded, and we're just trying to make the book even better for everyone supporting. So we appreciate anyone else contributing, and this is the only real chance to get it at this point in time. This is the only way to make sure that you get a copy for your collection.
Awesome. And where can people follow you on social media?
You can find me at Louis Southard or at Louis J. Southard, or you can always Google Louis Southard and all the evil things will pop up to find me. So that's where I'll be.
Awesome. And I know you're probably
Or people could rewatch this episode over and over again, and it's like I never left. And that's good for you too,
yeah,
because then you get a lot of views. So it's the
yes.
perfect symbiotic relationship right there.
So are you going to be doing any shows this year, or do you do
Uh,
shows or
I love going to cons. So this year I am doing MCM in London, and I am next month in May, and then November I am going to be at Thought Bubble in Harrogate, so which is a big comics and arts festival. So I'll be at those two. I may have others coming up, but they're not secured yet. But
yeah?
who knows? Maybe I'll pop up in an area near you.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat about the campaign, and you know, even though you're funded, best of luck as you try to reach those stretch goals, and whenever you have something else you you're working on and you want to come back, you're more than welcome to come back and we'll chat about it.
I'll take up your offer on that. Hopefully, by the tail end of the year, I'll have a bit more to talk about. That's a little tease for everyone that you've not seen the last of me. I'm still hustling and grinding and working. So I'll be back. That's a Louis Southern guarantee.
All right, well, we'll hold you to that, and we'll talk about how this, by that time, this campaign will definitely be wrapped up, and we'll see. We'll get a debrief from you on it.
It sounds yeah. We'll do an assessment. We'll see my thoughts and real. By then I'll be an entirely different person. I'll be like, I don't support that book. I don't endorse it anymore. It doesn't represent who I am now. Yeah, that'll be my whole thing by then.
Yeah.
But as of right now, I love it. Don't trust
All
future
right.
Lewis. He's a jerk. But present Lewis, he's telling you it's all cool.
I think that's the perfect note to end the interview on. Then before we get before we get any before people start second guessing themselves.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, like I said, I'll be in touch, and it was great chatting with you.
Thank you so much, Chad, and thank you, Comic Watch. I really